Okay, you're down to mere minutes. You're down to one podcast length, I suppose, give or take.
By my math, it's about 47 minutes.
We might have to go a little longer.
Okay, maybe an hour. At most 90. Let's say that.
You are moments away from engaging goblin mode.
Yeah, it's look, I'm going to go take this is the role I was born to play, Brad.
How is your preparation going? I mean, we're here, like there's no prep left to do. Everything's in place. So maybe you can let us in on, like, how'd you stock the fridge, or did you set up a kiddie pool in the living room, or I don't know.
I hard boiled a bunch of eggs. No. I'm kidding. I picked up some groceries the other day. Nothing too, like, I do have a pack of hot dogs in there. I'm not going to, I cracked into my first hot dog of 2023 earlier today for lunch.
Okay. Is it a standard eight wiener?
Yeah, I'm a Blue Applegate Farms. I like the salted, the uncured hot dog. It's delicious.
Do you anticipate getting through all 8 this week?
No. I don't know that my heart could take all 8 of those in one weekend.
Okay. I'm trying to gauge the level of moral degradation that is about to take place.
I mean, look, I went last night. I was like, oh man, we don't have any ice cream in the house. So on my way home, I stopped at the grocery store and got a tub of ice cream. And I thought about getting 2 just because I couldn't decide on flavors, but I ended up with just 1 because I was like, I'm not old enough to have 2 tubs of ice cream to go through in a weekend.
Okay. Here's something. Have you ever I assume you own an air mattress for guests and stuff?
Yes.
Have you ever just blown up the air mattress in front of the TV, just like move the coffee table out of the way and just turn the entire living room floor in front of the TV into a bed?
We have done that. In fact, actually, that was the setup last night because the wife and kiddo are going camping, and we wanted to inflate the air mattress before they left to make sure that it like hadn't developed leaks or whatever in the garage. So they would find that out here rather than in the, in the campground away from civilization.
Okay, so that's going with them.
Yeah, so I don't have sadly, I do not have an air mattress here.
No lounging in front of the television then.
So right now, the couch is arrayed so that it's perpendicular to the TV. So I can get a full recline on and still be aimed at the TV, which I think is going to become important because, the Zelda game came out yesterday night at like 9:00.
The Zelda is out.
Yeah, the new Zelda.
Can I ask, speaking of moral degradation, how do you intend to play that game?
So I have 2 Switches charged and preloaded right now.
Okay.
Gina got an OLED for her birthday a few years ago when it came out, and because she wanted her own Animal Crossing island. And so normally kind of it's a shit runs downhill situation in the house where I get the new thing and it runs downhill. But we made the choice to get her the OLED that year.
Sure.
So I put it on her OLED. I'm going to play it on some OLED.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go tell you, I have Yuzu. I have Yuzu'd things in the past.
Okay.
Because it's pretty easy to pull the file off of your Switch to, do the thing with my launch Switch and pull the file off and grab the save files. I don't know if I want to spend that much time fucking around with something instead of actually just playing the game.
Sure. Your time is limited. That's kind of where I'm at right now. Like looking at 33-step tutorials going, how do I want to enjoy this game? Maybe I'll just play it in its default state. I don't know.
If I could go to Best Buy and buy a Switch Pro that ran at 60 frames a second or didn't frame sag or whatever, I'm sure that I am so dark on Tears of the Kingdom that I haven't even looked at a digital, like a, hey, how does this game run report yet?
Okay.
I want to know nothing about it. I know that Zelda and Link are in it. That's all I got. I don't even think I watched the last trailer. So, if performance is real bad, maybe I'll reevaluate my choices.
Fair. Yeah. You have to make good use of your time. Clock is about to be ticking.
Well, but the question is what's like, I'm going to do takeout one night, right?
Okay.
Because I have stuff to make dinner tonight and I'll probably do takeout tomorrow. I was thinking about getting some like Korean chicken wings, maybe.
Sure.
I got to go in for something that like the rest of the fam usually isn't down for, right? So like pizza, fried chicken, like a bucket of Taco Bell, all of that's in the normal shit my family will eat. I need to go to something like I was thinking maybe some pho. And like I don't know where I don't know where I should go. I don't know what my goblin mode takeout meal is.
That's quite a conundrum.
I got a bucket. I got a box full of Captain Crunch here.
Okay. Nothing like a little mouth laceration to kick the weekend off.
And if your mouth doesn't have Captain Crunch calluses, I don't know what you're doing. You're playing your games wrong. Welcome to Brad and Will Made a Tech Pod. I'm Will.
Hi, Brad. Hello.
Hi, hello.
Hi. It's a podcast.
This week, we have a new thing. We're doing a new thing.
Yeah.
We're going to rate every piece of software.
Go on.
And we're going to...
Okay, CorelDRAW.
Which version?
Versus
3?
Descent. Okay.
3 or 4? 4 was bad. 3 was pretty good, in my opinion.
3.
But yeah, 3.
CorelDRAW 3 versus Descent.
No, we're not going to do this. People didn't like this. This was an up and down topic. Very divisive.
Are we ever going to finish that, or is that just gone?
I think we're just not going to ever talk about it again.
Man. I had fun.
I enjoyed that conversation immensely, but we didn't make very much progress on the topic.
No,
anyway, this time we were talking a few weeks ago, you and I were, about the things that were kind of inflection points in an industry, right? Like the moments where before that time, things were moving in one direction, or maybe we thought things were going to look like a different way than they ended up. And then all of a sudden this thing came out and everything changed. And then the rest of the industry was racing to catch up. And it was like in this world, it's like the iPod's a great example because there were MP3 players before the iPod. But and when you looked at the iPod, you kind of initially thought, oh man, that's just a lot of marketing crap. It's nothing different. And then you use an iPod and you're like, oh wow, I got to get one of these. And as a result, everybody else that was making MP3 players at the time suddenly either shifted to like a kind of different market niche, or they just disappeared. So we want to talk about these both from a what it was like at the time perspective, right? Because there's definitely a vibes about the moments before and the moments immediately following, and then the kind of longer term bits. But then there's also, it's nice to go back now because there's historical perspective and we know what was actually right and wrong about a lot of this stuff, and especially the stuff in the like early mid 2000s, even early 2010s now. So,
yep. And I mean, we'll see how this evolves over time, but I mean, we've even thought about products as trivial. Is trivial the right word here? As minor as like the Microsoft IntelliMouse, for example.
Yeah, I mean,
it doesn't have to be some world shaking like industry redefining thing necessarily, or you know, in mice that kind of was, but it's not quite on the level of the iPod. But it was still, I definitely looked at mice very differently before and after that IntelliMouse.
I would argue that the IntelliMouse probably birthed an entire, like it was the beginning of mouse as a specialized input device rather than a general purpose input device where everybody had the same mouse.
Much like most of the rest of the PC industry, it felt like the period, or it felt like the point where mice stopped wearing khakis.
Yeah, kind
Does
of.
That makes sense? But it makes sense.
Well,
like it was the point when the computer went from the thing you did your spreadsheets on to, you know.
I mean, I guess there's two ways to look at that. One is that it's the moment the capitalism really took hold of the mouse. Mm-hmm. You know, it's the Oreos with Pop Rocks embedded.
Wait, what?
Have you ever had the Fireworks Oreos?
Is that a thing?
Pop Rocks in the Oreo cream, yeah. It's
Fireworks Oreos.
I'm going to tell you, I often like to use it as a perfect example of late stage capitalism, but also they're very good. So fuck me, right?
Oh, this is horrifying. Firework Oreo with popping candy, says this package. Okay, no, thank you.
So you should try them. They're delicious. So
nothing against Pop Rocks, but anyway.
Anyway, the point is historically important, caused a shift in the industry. Hopefully have some historical perspective.
Yeah.
And we're going to do the first one today. We've been researching for a bit. I don't know about you, Brad, but I've watched a lot of videos of men wearing hoodies and sport coats.
Mm-hmm. As was the style at the time.
Yep. All of my rings have turned red.
Well, 3 out of 4 of them have.
Well, sometimes 4 though too. It depends on the type of. If you unplug that AV cable, you get all 4, and that was anyway. We're talking about the Xbox 360.
Yes. Yes,
it's
a console that I would argue essentially defined video game consoles from then on. Like,
yeah, I think that's fair.
pretty much everything that has come out since has been made in the image of that thing.
Well,
despite I think I need to double check, probably globally in the final analysis being the number 3 console of the generation.
That is a thing we probably should have looked up. I didn't actually do the research on that bit.
I can answer that in the next seconds as we continue to talk.
But the point, the thing about it is, I think it defined the modern internet connected console.
Yes, not just interconnected, but social as well.
Well, yeah, I mean,
I guess those go hand in hand. To be fair,
well, they didn't have to, because the PS2, the Dreamcast, the original Xbox, all were internet connected, but they didn't have that social component. I guess even the GameCube had a modem, right? You could jam a thing on there.
Yes, it was add-on, as was the PS2 at that time. They both had modems. The PS2 also had an Ethernet adapter eventually.
Yeah,
I don't think the GameCube did, but obviously the original
Dreamcast,
Xbox,
you could plug an Ethernet cable in eventually, right?
There was a broadband adapter for the Dreamcast, but I mean that lasted for about 8 minutes, just like the rest of the Dreamcast.
But I mean, the point is, it took the idea of a network connected console, something, and instead of just saying, hey, you can play multiplayer games on this, they took the next step and they looked at what was happening with the early social networks leading up to the 2005 launch of the console, and built everything around that in a way that I don't think anybody else, I don't think Sony and Nintendo would have ever gotten to, or would have taken much, much longer to get to, without Microsoft saying, hey, look, the ability to play games with your friends and to be participating in an ecosystem across multiplayer and single player games is something that people want. And they were absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, as somebody who tried to set up online stuff for PS2 games and looking at what the onboarding and the setup network configuration process was like for games on the PS2, they never would have gotten to where they're at now without the 360 coming in and saying, hey, that should all just work at the platform level, which is a big part of what we're going to heap praise on here, I think, is things working at the platform level. I will say real fast, 360 indeed narrowly the number 3 console of that generation.
And that's even counting that everybody had to buy like 3 or 4 of them.
Yes, indeed. Just barely by like single digit millions behind the PS3.
Yeah.
We obviously way out in front, but of those 3, like easily the most lastingly influential console of the 3.
Yeah. I would definitely agree with that. So yeah, the platform level features, we're going to talk about let's talk about why it was special first, and then we'll get into like the backstory on how they made it and marketing and all that stuff. But the platform level features are a big deal. The main thing is you started with a gamer tag, which was a cross platform, a whole platform user ID that tied all your other stuff. So previously, I think I remember seeing people play Tony Hawk Pro Skater 3 on the PlayStation 2, and it was almost like you were using GameSpy or some other PC lobby search thing. Your user accounts were not tied to the platform necessarily, so you had to create a new account for each game, and it was fraud. The original Xbox had a little bit of this stuff. Like it had the hints, the kind of beginnings of a lot of this stuff, including gamer tags.
So did you use Xbox Live on the original Xbox? Because that's like a huge blind spot for me. I actually never had an Xbox account. I never had I never really got online with that thing. I must have plugged it into an Ethernet cable, I guess, at some point, but I never signed up for Xbox Live and experienced whatever proto online was with the Xbox. So if you could speak to that, I'm actually curious to talk about it.
So yeah, I played Lynx a lot with some friends. Like I had a regular Tuesday night, we're going to play video game golf on the internet with each other. And it had a lot of the stuff that came to the Xbox 360. Like you had voice that you could talk to each other with headsets on, and you had a gamer tag that you shared. And that was the way you made friends inside Lynx. Lynx was a first party game, I think, by that point. I think Microsoft had bought them by then. I can't remember.
Sounds right. Sounds like the kind of game Microsoft would buy. Yeah,
and then never do anything with again, because why do we not need more good golf games? But what do I care? But yeah, but those friends lists were inside the apps. So you didn't have a way on the Xbox, the original Xbox, at least at the times I was playing it, that I recall, to look in and see what your friends who weren't playing that game were doing. Right.
That was quietly kind of the coolest thing about the Xbox 360 when it came out to me, was what they called rich presents.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I know people who are Giant Bomb listeners have heard us talk about that phrase many times because it's kind of silly and very Microsoft. But it was literally just the flavor text of like, it was cool enough you could see what game people were playing, but the fact that there was some kind of API or some sort of system where the game would actually tell you what they were doing in that game.
It'd be like, hey, he's in chapter 3 of Dead Rising or whatever.
Right. Yes, slaughtering zombies in
the
whatever.
8th hole of Pebble Beach.
Pebble Beach.
That's a golf course. Yeah.
Yes.
The other thing is the voice and all that stuff was limited to one. Like you couldn't, if your friend, there was no way to do cross game planning on the original Xbox. So if you wanted to say, if you like, I saw you were online and you were playing, I don't know, Mech Assault or Mech Warrior, some game that I wasn't playing, there was no way for me to like connect to you and have a conversation about, hey, let's go play a game together. What do you have? And have that kind of conversation.
Interesting. So if you had asked me, if I had to guess, I would have thought they would have had kind of platform level voice chat.
I think they had text chat, but you had to do input with the gamepad, and you know how that it's not great.
Yes.
So yeah, and then stuff like patching, and like there were some games that patched, but it definitely wasn't universal. There was some DLC stuff, but you had to almost always access it from inside the game. So there wasn't like a store on the platform until way, way late.
Yeah, I actually kind of want to look up a list if I can find one of original Xbox games that had DLC.
So like Halo was one of them. Halo 2.
Halo 2, right?
Yeah.
Like, but if I had to guess, another thing where if I'd had to guess, I would have said like, oh, there was no DLC on that. It was like you could do online games, but surely they weren't selling content, but I guess they were.
I don't believe they sold a whole lot of content because it was Skyrim. The horse armor was Oblivion, right?
Yeah, well, that was on the 360.
That was a 360 game. Yeah,
we'll get to that for sure.
But I mean, I guess my point is, so the other thing that's worth mentioning, my Xbox, I went to try to plug it in to see what I can experience with this. I think it's let loose the mortal coil.
Oh no. Have you opened it up?
I haven't opened it up yet. It's impossible to search for original Xbox stuff.
It really is.
Because of the stupid Xbox One name for the 3rd generation Xbox.
Just heap another reason on the pile to despise the Xbox One.
Yeah. Anyway, okay.
I'm in the middle of that process right now. I typically will just type original Xbox.
Yeah, or Xbox first generation is sometimes good, but I couldn't find, like I was looking for videos of people going through the menus and you can't find, they're just impossible to find.
Yes, it's hard. It's very hard. Anyway,
it's possible it's the power supply and not the capacitor, the leaky capacitors.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how widespread it actually is for that capacitor to kill boards. Obviously, it's not great to have the contents of that thing leaking out onto the PCB, but I haven't actually seen a lot of people who have confirmed that it killed their system.
Well, the other thing is I didn't hear a hard drive spin up when I plugged it in, so it could just be that the bearings in the hard drive are frozen, and that's a relatively easy problem to fix. Anyway,
I think there's weird stuff around like. There's some encryption on the drive that they used, or
I'm sure that's a solved problem at this point.
And it definitely is, but I'm sure it probably won't boot if it can't read the hard drive.
Yeah. So anyway, I literally dug out the old Xbox to see if I could go see what of this stuff still works and what this experience was, and it was sadly did not cooperate.
Well, it's all gone. Also, they shut down that version of Xbox Live.
But I'd still be able to load the game and see if where the friends menus and stuff are. Anyway,
you could at least look at the software.
So yeah, platform level stuff and attached to the gamer tag stuff like achievements, right?
I mean, yeah, like if you just want to get into the list of things this thing kind of debuted or made better as a package, like we could probably sit here for the rest of the episode and talk about it. I mean, it's kind of crazy. It's like achievements. People obviously have their feelings about achievements at this point, but they were mind-blowing a mind-blowing concept at the time. If you set aside like the achievement hunting, like people debasing themselves for more points and stuff like that.
Well, it gave you a thing to do that was social with your friends,
right?
That worked in single player games in addition to multiplayer games,
sure.
Right? Like gave you a way that could be competitive or comparative or whatever verb you want to use there. It let you see what it let you see how you kind of stacked up and where you were, and that my problems personally with achievements aside, that's a cool thing, and it gave you a reason, like it was a reason to connect your thing to the internet, even if you only played single player games.
Sure. I mean, I've said it a million times, but like really well designed achievements are incredibly valuable in and of themselves because they expand the game, right? Like there were so many one-off objectives that they could give you that would not have been surfaced in the core game design, but it's like, hey, land a jump off of some weird feature of this one map type thing, like that would never fit into like the quote unquote rules of the game they were making, but like because they had this meta objective system, they could write all this other bizarre stuff into the things you could be doing, and those became like the bragging rights were real there for truly really difficult or rare achievements. People actually would go like, oh my God, you did that.
Well, and things like nudging players to find things that they might not find otherwise and weren't exposed, like that would be difficult to expose outside of inside the meta of the game. Like I quite like I think the intent behind achievements is really good, and they got kind of weird for a while, but they're kind of back to a nice place now. It seems like overall.
Yeah. They really just not even just on the Xbox, but Steam, PlayStation trophies, like they're just kind of in the background these days. I feel like people don't really talk about them or acknowledge them these days. They're just sort of there.
It's just a thing. I mean, the one exception is the platinums on the PlayStation. People seem to be.
Yes.
I see tweets about that.
There is definitely still some bragging rights there.
Yeah.
And the smartest, I've said it before, the smartest games on the PlayStation will make it so that when you finish the game, you're like 3-4 trophies away from the platinum.
Oh yeah, the Ratchet and Clank effect.
Yes, yes. Like just to get you over the line, like you just got to dangle that in front of people.
Just play a couple more hours, Brad.
Yeah, but like honestly though, like booting up the 360 and digging into it and seeing what was in there, I mean, it completely exploded my mind as far as what a console could be, and mostly because it felt more like a computer. And I don't mean that in like the boring khaki wearing negative sense, but more just like, oh my gosh, there's actual software. There's like a real operating system running on here that's tracking stuff. And the way that can tie into games at a global level is just kind of amazing, right? Yeah,
it was the console became more than the thing that you jammed the disc into, and became the glue that held all your games together.
Yeah, like I think we'd kind of been inching there. Like I mean, I was similarly mind blown by the PlayStation 1's like memory cards management interface and CD player. It was like, what do you mean when you turn this thing on without a game in there, it still boots up and lets you do something? Like that's crazy. There's an opera, but like I don't know if that lived in like ROM or something. Like that was not some real OS.
It was it was a real OS. It was just a really light, tiny little one, right?
Right. I mean, I should probably give some examples here. Like the stuff I'm talking about is like the fact that you could set your inverted control preference at the system level and then just have every game respect it.
Yeah,
like that was just like there were so many things on this console that were just like when you saw that they had done them, you would just like slap your forehead and go like, of course. Like, why did nobody done that before? Like, that's incredible.
It makes sense that Microsoft understood the value of setting defaults, right? Because they had at this time they were 5-6 years off from the IE stuff, and were like they'd gotten in trouble for abusing defaults and the fact that people never changed defaults. And they were like, oh, what if we use this power of defaults for good and not evil? And by making the API require you to honor stuff like that, and using their power as a platform holder for good, it meant that the game developers had to support their APIs. And it was stuff like cross-game voice. Just voice as a system level feature, honestly, was where it started. And the cross-game party stuff came fairly late. I think it was even maybe after the Blades were on their way out.
My memory is, around the time they moved to the NXE, the new Xbox experience, is around when parties rolled out, like 3 years after launch.
I think there was a little bit of Blades and parties, and then the NXE came, right. And that's when the party interface kind of got good. Well, the rest of the interface got bad. But the parties were a cross-game voice system. But like, I want to go back to like having voice as a system level feature, because it's hard to remember now in a world with Discord, and like even Nintendo has voice for their. I mean, it's bad and it uses phones and like look, it's not to be emulated
to Nintendo.
Yeah,
right now.
but like I was working at a PC magazine, and a lot of people that were on PC magazines were stoked about playing Halo 2 on the Xbox 360 because we could talk to each other while we were playing without having to fuck around with TeamSpeak or one of the other Mumble or whatever the other servers were at the time. Ventrilo. God. Yeah, I guess Mumble wasn't around then.
Got to hop on the vent, bro.
Yeah, but it was just, hey, all you have to do is plug in your headset and put on your head, and it just works.
Yeah. I mean, really, it was just the idea of cross game everything, right? Like cross game voice, cross game invites, like, and even the way the messaging worked, like contextual actions. Actually, I think is what I'm really getting at here. Like the way that the notifications, I think they called them toasts.
Yeah, the toasts.
Like the fact that you could hit a guide button whenever one of those was on the screen, and it would activate whatever was relevant to that notification, right? Like that was, again, it sounds so simple and straightforward and at this point, but like the fact that you could be playing a game, somebody could send you an invite. You could hit the guide button while the invite was on the screen, and it would just launch the other game and take you right to their game.
You say that now, and I'm thinking about it. It's the first place I saw system level notifications, probably.
Like on a console,
on a device.
Because it was before interesting. Phones. Oh, of course. I hadn't even actually thought about that.
iOS didn't get system level notifications until iOS 4 in like 2010.
Yeah.
Windows Mobile you could have. You like an app could pop up a notification, but it wasn't like a system UI thing, and it wasn't the two parts of that were, hey, letting you know it's here, and then giving you a call to action that took you to the right place. Prior to this, the phone apps would do one of those, but not the other usually.
Sure. So, and also, we should mention the 360 came out in November 2005. And so like smartphones generally were relegated kind of to the world of like business with Blackberries and stuff like that.
Yeah, it was like Blackberries and Windows Mobile and Palm phones and stuff like that.
This is still a couple of years before the iPhone even debuted.
Yeah. So like a system level notification thing, I don't think Windows had that at that point. I'd have to go back and look, but it feels like that was a much later feature.
I mean, I guess 98% of the world was still on XP at that point, right? Well, Vista wasn't even out, right?
Vista wasn't out until 2006, right? I think. I can't remember.
Right.
But yeah, so like the ability to say, hey, to pop on and see you playing a game and say, hey, do you want to come play Halo with me, and hit the button, and you get a message that then brings you directly into my Halo game and puts us on voice together. And also, because voice was a system level feature, people who made games like Halo and Chromehounds were able to do crazy shit with voice. Like, if you were standing next to somebody on the other team in Halo and you were talking, then they would hear your half of your party comms because it was being broadcast in the physical space of the game.
Yep.
And like a kind of a privacy issue in retrospect.
Sure.
Really fucking cool nonetheless.
Yeah, that strikes me as like kind of the ultimate online style of like, we haven't fully thought through the social ramifications of what we're doing with this technology here. We're just going to let everything, like anything, go here.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Uno thing too. When they released the webcam for it, and they were like, and all of a sudden there's people, and you're seeing a lot of hog and cocaine mountains and all sorts of weird shit on playing Uno.
Yeah, like the camera is yet another example. I guess we'll get to it. Like there's so many things to talk about here. I'm like having to restrain myself from just going off on 8 tangents. But like putting the headset in the box, like mandating the headset in the box was like, that's whoever thought of that. Like that was a genius move of like, nobody's going to use this voice feature unless everybody can use this voice feature. So we have to enable that.
And it's also one of those situations where, if they had said, "Oh man, this headset costs us 75 cents each when we put them in the box, we're going to sell 1 billion of these things. We can't spend that 75 cents for 1 billion headsets." Nobody would have used them. So yeah. Okay. So friends list, messaging, all the normal stuff from social networks. Huge deal.
Yeah. So I would even say, I mean, it was platform level features. It was cross game features. And then there was also just mandating standards. And like, we already talked about some of that with like being able to set preferences globally, but there was even stuff like they mandated for a long time, and this evolved over time, but they mandated how big patches could be. They mandated how updates had to roll out because broadband was still relatively new, and they had to make sure that nobody's going to launch a game and sit there for 30 minutes or 45 minutes waiting.
Well, that went out the window, huh?
I mean, yes, granted, internet connections got faster. And I also think developers probably bristled pretty regularly at the patch limit early on or later.
They had size limits for patches. They also had size limits for like the difference between downloadable games had really small size limits in the beginning.
I think originally XBLA games were limited like 50 megabytes
or 100 megabytes. It was so they'd fit on memory cards, right? Because there was the hard drive was optional on the 360.
Right. But like, I'm sure there were all kinds of development headaches that went along with these pretty onerous restrictions. But on the end user side, especially as somebody like I was covering games by the time the 360 came out professionally, so this was like a work tool as well as a video game console, and like never having to wait for patches, like having that whole part of the experience that streamlined was really meaningful.
Yeah.
You had to engage with it all the time. Downloadable games, since we're talking about patches, like
there were downloadable games before, I think.
Yes,
but it was pretty limited. And if I recall, on the Xbox One, you had to put a disc in to download the games.
I'm once again trying to search for
first generation downloadable games. Yeah,
it's such a nightmare. But I mean, like even if there were some downloadable games available,
that's the point.
The concept came into its own on the 360. Yeah, inarguably.
I mean, look, the first downloadable games were for the Nintendo DD in Japan in the 80s. We all know that. We don't need to get into it. The point of this is that like when stuff like Summer of Arcade happened, it changed the conversation about an entire class of games and basically gave birth to like commercially successful indie games.
Yeah, I mean, even before that, even at launch. Maybe some would disagree, but I think Geometry Wars is genuinely one of the best games ever made.
It was the game I bought an Xbox 360 for.
Right. It was the game I've spent all my time playing. When I got my 360, I played this $5 downloadable game more than any of the big $50 disc games.
There was nothing else on the launch lineup that I gave a shit about except for, I mean, Cameo was nice, I guess, but like
I was like Hexic, and there were some other XBLA games that were cool, but like this $5 game, that even then takes 60 seconds to download.
Yep.
And is just still one of the most enduring things on there. But yeah, like I think Summer of Arcade started in 2008. That was, if people don't remember, it was really just a promotional event. It was one game a week for X number of weeks every summer for like 5-6 years in a row.
Yeah, right.
Where they essentially just put a lot of marketing muscle behind the games that were chosen as the Summer of Arcade games, but they were mostly all bangers.
The marketing muscle was that A, they selected games that were bangers, and B, they put them on the front page of the dashboard of that thing, because by that point they had made the dashboard of the Xbox a destination in and of itself.
Right.
So previously, like you'd put the disc in the console, you'd never see the OS except for when you were changing games or whatever. With this, it was like, oh, even if I'm playing a disc game, I'm gonna probably go see what's in the dashboard in case, like, because Super Meat Boy is freaking awesome, and if there's a chance to have more Super Meat Boy, I'm going to get more Super. I want to play more Super Meat Boy, or whatever the indie game was. So
yeah, I got to the point where I really looked forward to Summer of Arcade because I knew I was going to play some of the best games of the year there. I mean, Braid, Castle Crashers, Geometry Wars 2, Shadow Complex, Explosion Man, Trials HD, Limbo, Bastion.
I forgot that Shadow Complex came out of that too.
Yeah, It was like some serious. It was stacked, for sure.
And so, like, there's a conversation to be had that probably doesn't live in here, but because they limited the number of slots that were available for games, period. Like, it wasn't like there was an infinite number of games. There were maybe 2 indie games a week and one. There weren't infinite downloadable games at that point, partly because there weren't many people making downloadable size scale games, but also partly because Microsoft really limited the number of games that they allowed on the platform. So if you got one of those slots, you had a pretty good chance of having a commercial success if you made something that was halfway decent.
I remember stories of developers having to sign up for publishing deals with major publishers just to get a slot, not because they necessarily needed the publishing services, but because those big companies had more inroads to publish more games.
Just to be clear, I don't think that this is a great solution to the problem. No. Right?
Like it's kind of, I would qualify it kind of the same way I did about like the limited patch sizes and stuff. Like I'm sure on the developer end, it created no end of headaches and pain, but.
Well, we missed out a lot of good games because they couldn't get slots or they didn't want to deal with publishers or whatever.
Right.
But it was maybe the right solution for the time. I don't know. But yeah, the downloadable stuff, the backwards compatibility was the other thing that was interesting. They tied it to the hard drive because the original Xbox had a hard drive, and you had to have a hard drive to play the original Xbox games because some of them wrote insane amounts of data to the hard drive.
Yeah, there was also, I don't think this was ever confirmed, but so the original Xbox had an NVIDIA GPU.
Oh, right.
They moved to ATI.
Chipset. Yeah,
they moved to ATI for the 360, and forever after. Yeah, AMD/ATI have made console GPUs pretty much.
Living that APU life.
It was always rumored that they kind of embedded the licensing fee they had to pay to NVIDIA for the backwards compatibility into the purchase of the hard drive.
That makes sense. I feel like the relationship with Microsoft and NVIDIA after the first Xbox, maybe not great. I don't know. I always got that feeling.
NVIDIA never did a console again except for the Switch. And I think that was kind of an accident because the Tegra already existed.
Well, they've also done those Shield things, which are kind of console.
Well, yeah, but I mean, they never did the graphics hardware for another company's console.
Oh no,
except for the Switch, which again was already an existing part.
Yeah,
I think they did the RSX in the PS3, but that's kind of not the same thing.
Yeah, the other thing that like on the hardware front we haven't talked about yet is that the fact that the controller was wireless.
Yes. Now, I know, to be fair, I think that was only in the Pro SKU at launch. I believe the basic, the core, Xbox 360 core, I think they called it, came with the wired. I believe.
I mean, but it still had the hardware inside it to let you buy a $50 wireless controller and use it with that upgraded SKU.
Yes, they were happy to sell you more controllers if you wanted to get a wireless one for that basic system. And again, you could buy the hard drive separately and slap it on.
Yeah.
In fact, you could turn a core into a probe with accessories. There was nothing fundamentally. I think the drive tray was not chrome.
The drive tray was not chrome on the core.
The drive tray was just matte plastic.
It was sad white plastic. The wireless controller was a big deal because we'd had wireless controllers before the Wavebird on the GameCube.
I never owned a Wavebird, but people like worshipped the Wavebird.
I have two of them. They're great. I still use them occasionally.
Yeah,
but the wireless controller just being a thing, it didn't have physical switches. You just press the button, it would turn on the console. Like it felt like it was integrated with the console, and it had the headset plug on it still, so you could get good high quality voice over that wireless link. And the range on the radio and the wireless controller was insane.
Yeah, it was quite good. Like everything you're describing, again, it's all such old hat at this point. But when I put myself back in that time.
Yeah, these are the table stakes now, right?
Right. But thinking about just being tethered to the consoles I was playing with the controller cord back then. And when this thing came out, not only was it wireless, but for some reason, the turning it on with the controller part was the part that really just like, it's like, man, we're really living in the future now.
Yeah.
There were some, like every one of these little things is like cool in its own right, but it's only when you have like 24 of these things across this console that hadn't been done before that you really go like, man, this thing kind of changed everything.
Well, and also prior to that point, a lot of wireless stuff was janky, right? Like you would say, oh man, I don't want the wireless one. I'm going to take the cord. And they were at the right time. The radio stuff had gotten good enough at that point that the 2.4 gigahertz data radios were reliable and it was massively over-engineered. So it had an enormous range. Like I used to use an Xbox 360 and I had a long HDMI cable that went to the living room through two walls. And I would set an Xbox 360 PC dongle, a USB thing that you plugged in your PC to give you an Xbox 360 controller radio. And I just run the HDMI cable. It would pipe the audio and video. And then I'd control the games from 25 feet away through a couple of walls in the living room with Xbox 360 controllers. And it worked really stupidly well. Oh, also through the TV. Is worth mentioning. So yeah,
it's pretty impressive.
Like enormously over-engineered. So I mean, look, some parts were enormously over-engineered. Some parts maybe less so. I don't know.
Yes. We'll get there. Just to wrap up we talked about XBLA games and where that went over time. They did have DLC on the original Xbox, but DLC really became like a household word on the 360,
We're going to talk about horse armor, Brad.
Somewhat questionably, dubiously starting with horse armor.
Yeah.
Which was, I would have to look up.
You want a costume for your horse? It's $5. That's a reasonable price.
I
bought a backpack in Fortnite for 150 Tim Epic bucks the other day.
Maybe they were just very ahead of their time.
I mean,
you can still buy it. You can still buy the horse armor.
Really?
Yes.
Can you even still play?
Yeah,
is Oblivion backwards compatible?
They pretty much never. Oh yeah, absolutely.
It's funny because they released Skyrim like 23 times, and I haven't gotten to see Sir Patrick Stewart in Oblivion in a good 15 years at this point. It feels like.
Man, I'm actually there. I mean, there's so many like remember the horse armor articles out there that I'm having a hard time getting to the store page, but I'm quite sure you can still buy it.
It's the horse armor. It was $5, right?
Here it is. I found it.
It kind of makes sense because like if they sold you a costume for your character in the game, you'd never be able to see it. But if they sell you a costume for your horse, you see it every time.
That's right. Now, Luke, do you want your horse to get hurt?
Well, the mistake was they needed to make the horse look like something really stupid. Like if they had made the horse look like an Oscar Mayer Wienermobile, people would have been stoked.
Yes,
right.
Indeed. Yes. You know, stealth marketing through the Xbox was a whole other questionable innovation. I mean, you know, gamer pictures in and of themselves were kind of ridiculous and goofy and stupid and fun. But then once they started like, you can download Burger King gamer pictures or, you know, now here, download this picture from the forthcoming major motion picture Men in Black 3.
Look, I have a lot of garbage Xbox avatars in my account. Yes.
Like ironically using branded marketing gamer pics became its own whole stupid thing.
Also, you remember when they did the avatars, you could buy the costumes for the avatars. Like I put money in the Henson Corporation for some Muppet avatars, and I'm pretty sure I bought a RoboCop costume from my guy. You're welcome, boys. You're welcome, boys.
Yeah. Horse armor is currently $2.49. I don't know if that's the original pricing or not. Also, that would have been in Microsoft points.
Yeah.
To be clear, at the time, that would have been
100.
I think that's 1,000. I think that's 1,000 Microsoft points.
No, it was 800 was $10.
No. Oh my God, I've got the conversion rate in my mind. I was thinking it was 400 points to the dollar. It was 400 points to the $5.
Yeah.
It was 80 points to the dollar because they did the horrible.
You got to make the math hard so the kids don't understand how much money they're spending, Brad.
We're just going to round down a little bit to make it seem like less than it actually costs.
Yeah. They also did some kind of nutty tie-in stuff with the like they took advantage of the fact that you could download entire games on the console by saying, hey man, if you buy we have a new franchise, we want to put this out. If people who buy this disc are gonna be able to play the Halo 3 beta before anybody else. And that's why we have Crackdown now, it seems like.
Crackdown was a great game in its own right.
I collected all those orbs. I had to collect them all, and I did.
What happened to the subsequent Crackdown games? Better not discussed, perhaps.
Look, we don't need to talk about that. But
I mean, you know, we straight up got advert games eventually. Like, remember the Toyota Yaris game?
Oh yeah. Well, was Sneak King, was that a Xbox 360 game, or that was BK games or 360 games? Right.
Yes. Although you had to go to a Burger King to buy that.
I mean,
Yaris was free.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Ain't nobody paying for
that. Yaris game was bad, just for the record.
It had achievement points just like everything else.
It did have charm.
Last thing about digital games on the console. I don't know for a fact. I guess it's possible the PS3 started doing it first, but I don't think so. The 360 started selling proper retail disc games digitally before the end of this generation.
Oh, right.
Which
at the time, how can we forget?
Even that was even after 5 years, I think it was 2010 when they started doing that. And even after 5 years of XBLA games, still when they started selling games that you could just walk into a store and buy on disc or buy them on the console, like still mind blowing.
And 360 was DVDs, right? So it was like an 8 gig game max for a single DVD game.
Yeah. Remember, I mean, you know, like their kind of weird, like quasi PC philosophy for that thing continued to manifest right up to the end. Because remember, eventually they started letting you install games to the hard drive. You still had to authenticate, but
right, that's right. You could copy the entire disk to the hard, and then it would load a little bit faster.
And yes, it would load faster. But also by the end, they were getting to workarounds where like they would ship a 2-disc game, and disc 2 would just be like some install disc.
Yeah.
And then you would never have to change discs because it would just be able to read from 2 DVDs worth of information with one disc.
I feel like one of the other things they did that was the first time you had games that like could talk to other games' save files, right? In an appreciable way. Because like the Mass Effect thing would kind of import the save file, right?
Yeah, they did that. Yeah, but remember Metal Gear Solid on the first PlayStation.
Oh, that's right. That's right. PlayStation had done that for a while.
Yes. But like being able to sell games, like full games online, obviously was where everything was going. And they did that first, like covering games at the time. We've probably talked about this before. There was about a 1 to 2 month period where it felt like we were entering a new golden age of covering video games.
At the beginning or at the end?
No. Or when they started doing digital retail games.
Oh, right.
Because previously, to cover games, we had to get a physical copy of the game mailed to the office, right?
Yeah.
And typically they weren't going to send more than one copy per outlet, like maybe 2 if you were lucky.
Yeah.
I just still remember getting the email from Microsoft when no, it wasn't Crackdown. What was it? Gosh, this is going to kill me. It was something that came out right before Halo Reach. It was Crackdown 2. I'm sorry. That's what it was.
Yeah. Crackdown 2 was before Halo Reach.
Which again turned out to not be an incredible game, but getting that email from Microsoft was just like, hey, here's 5 codes for Crackdown 2.
It's funny because that's one of the.
What do you mean?
that was one of the first things and I mean, I guess I'd gotten Fez, a code for Fez, but that was an arcade game, so it felt different.
So again, for like, $5, $10, $15 games, it was one thing, but it was, I mean, this is kind of inside baseball, like for consumers, who cares? But it was very much like, oh my God, what do you mean? Like everybody in this office can now play Crackdown 2. Like all of us can play it at the same time and talk about it now, instead of the one person who was assigned the review or got the copy in.
Well, it changed the way you guys did the Bombcast for sure.
That's what I mean. But so that lasted for like a month, because the second game they did that with was Halo Reach. And then Halo Reach got leaked off the download server.
Oh,
and then they stopped doing that.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so you can still go back and find the news articles from 2010, because they had Halo Reach up for download early so people could redeem vouchers and get review copies.
Yeah.
Somebody figured out how to extract that whole build of the game off the servers, and so the game leaked ahead of time. I don't know if it was fully playable or maybe they just data mined it
and found out. That sucks.
Still, it was compromised enough that they instantly stopped that practice. I was like, God damn it.
It's funny.
That was nice while it lasted.
Yeah, that. Well, and then, I mean, yeah, the later platforms kind of tightened some of that stuff up, it seems like.
Yes. Like then it became a whole, it's more inside baseball of like, they only have so many codes to go around now. Like you think they could just generate them ad infinitum, but no.
But yeah, so the hardware stuff, we touched a little bit of the controller before. It's important to mention, like when they were pitching the Xbox 360, before they even announced the hardware, Microsoft was going around to PC outlets and saying, hey, we're thinking about doing this thing. We want to have a uniform interface for PC games to use a gamepad. And up until this point, gamepads on PC were like, calling them second class citizens is kind of being kind. Mm-hmm. Because each game you'd have to load up the game and then you'd have to kind of reverse engineer what the developer intended the controls to be, probably without having played the game at all. Like you went into a menu and literally said, okay, I want A to be this, and I want B to be reload, and and X to be slide or whatever it happened to be.
Were you still mapping literal up and down and left and right on the D-pad or the joystick at that time? Because you definitely, prior to that, you definitely had to. And I don't know if they had even standardized that much at that point.
So kind of prior to Halo, the controls were definitely non-standard. Maybe time splitters was the other one that was really important, I think, for using both sticks together. But yeah, there was no consensus on like left trigger would be aim down sights and right trigger would be aim and stuff like that. Sometimes you'd click the stick to zoom in. Sometimes it would be.
What I'm talking about is like, and again, maybe this had been fixed by this point, but like, remember like in the 90s, you would boot up a game when you had your gamepad plugged in, and it literally, the first time you launched the game, it would be like press up on the D-pad, press down on the D-pad, press left, because it didn't know what up and down were. You had to define them manually. So like I'm trying to figure out how rudimentary things still were in that sense before the 360 and the Windows drivers for it.
So if you had a common gamepad, like a Logitech or something that was like common enough that the vendor, the game developer would have built in a preset for it, it would look at the USB HID and be like, oh, okay, you're one of these. Here's what we recommend. and it would probably fill in for you. If you had anything even the slightest bit weird, or you had janky USB drivers on your motherboard or any other number of failure cases, it would not, you'd have to do the thing that you're describing. So when Microsoft came around, I was like, hey, here's what we're thinking about for a controller. We think it should have bumpers and triggers and 4 face buttons and a start and a select and 2 sticks that you can click. And I was like, yeah, that sounds fantastic. Nobody's ever going to support it. And then because the console was successful and because they made the drivers easy to use and the APIs to interface with the controllers were really straightforward, everybody used it. And now you plug in a gamepad and it just works. Even if you plug in a PS4 gamepad or this is largely due to some work that Valve has done at Steam, but you plug in a DualSense or a Nintendo Pro controller and they work too. And I don't think we would have that without the Xbox either.
Definitely not. I mean, not to sound like a broken record here, but the number of times you were like doing things for the first time in this era and having your mind exploded, it was endless. But that was another one, was the first time you plugged a wired 360 controller into a computer and it just started working.
Well, but
and the game recognized it. And then eventually, not after not too long, they started putting the actual button prompts as iconography in the game. Right. And it was just like, oh my God, like the stuff has reached a level of integration that I didn't think it would ever get to.
Well, the other thing that's important about this whole idea is that resulted in the Xbox default controller layout being pretty much the standard layout for most games. Like there's some variants because Nintendo doesn't have analog triggers and Sony puts the sticks on the bottom instead of a cattywampus up and down thing. But 2 sticks, 4 face buttons, 2 bumpers, 2 triggers, the sticks click, start and select is the standard now.
Yep. And this is 100% where that came from, for sure. Also, this is like something I have to remind myself a lot of these days, to never be deceived by things working in a way that seems like they're magic where computers are involved. Like anytime anything ever just seems like it happens, it didn't just happen. Like somebody probably had to like sweat blood to automate that in some way, in terms of like plugging hardware into a thing and having it just work.
Oh yeah, and on not just the hardware side or the Windows side or the driver side or even the Xbox side, it's that they also went to all these studios and were like, look, we're going to give you a shitload of controllers and we're going to give you some early busted ass APIs that probably don't work real good, and we promise that by the time you ship your game, it's going to just work. And then they did.
Yeah, like whether it's at the level of like firmware or a microcontroller or like plug and play logic and a driver that goes along with it, or like developers using some API at the game level, like tons of work has to happen behind the scenes for something to just get plugged in and go. Yeah, and like that was a huge milestone for kind of cross platform between PC and console.
Well, it's funny because like that development stuff and the outreach that happened with that was the culmination of, at this point, 10-ish years of DirectX work. They shipped the 360 shipped with DX9 and a D3D9 capable GPU. It had programmable shaders. It was a very Microsoft-y way of building software. You use Visual Studio and you compiled stuff to it and you send it across a network, and you could do debug stuff on a PC.
Oh, dude, don't even get me started. I think we've talked before. We had debug Xboxes in the office to run unfinished games on. Yeah,
and to get screenshots off of the consoles.
Right. Yes. Yeah. So we got our hands on the Xbox Neighborhood tool that was for developers at some point that let you connect to an Xbox over the network and take JPEGs of whatever was in the frame buffer out of it, and that's how we started getting high quality Xbox screenshots.
Yeah, to give a sense of not so capture cards were difficult and produced kind of bad results.
Yep.
The way we often would get screenshots for the magazines, not in probably the PS, like once we had debugs and could grab frame buffer images out, that would obviously work. But before, it wasn't too long before that we had a dark room with a camera on one end, and you would sit in the room that was dark with the exposure on the camera set to a really specific place and shoot pictures of the TV on which you were playing the game.
Yeah. I think people don't realize how janky it was to get screenshots and footage of video games back then. Like I remember, again, I was deep into making video game content on a website at that point, but like the day I realized, oh my God, we're going to be able to get screenshots for the website of Xbox 360 games that look just as good as the, I don't love the term bullshot, but like the kind of manicured shots,
the marketing screenshots that you were provided by the platform.
Yeah. Like the marketing screenshots that are coming out before release. Like, oh my God, our screenshots are going to be just as high quality as that. And that was because it was a network connected console with like Windows-esque accessibility features for developers and stuff, right?
Yeah, I did a handful of reviews for OXM back in the day, and they had a whole debug rig that they'd send home with you to get screenshots. And it was like, hey, here's a foot pedal that's just a keyboard that you would jam as when you wanted the screenshot, and then you'd get 200 screenshots out of it, and you'd be able to go through and get exactly the thing you wanted. It was amazing.
To be clear, the interface on the Xbox Neighborhood tool was very like programmer GUI. It was just like, okay, somebody hacked this together with like whatever Win32. Like this is just a very basic control panel. So like the best you could do was like tab the focus over to the screenshot button and then like, use your foot to hit space over and over or whatever.
Yeah, it seemed like the same tool that you probably would have used if you were in a big studio and you wanted to get debug builds over to testers and stuff like that.
That's exactly what it was. It was for debugging. It was not for whatever dumb thing we were doing.
Yeah. But having access to that meant the coverage was better, frankly.
Yes. Yeah.
The hardware, like the Wii was the least capable console of that generation, but it was easier to develop for, but less capable theoretically than the PS3, right?
Yeah, I don't know how big that divide is. I think like in the final analysis, the PS3 was a bit more powerful, but I don't think it was a huge gap.
Well, the feeling I always had from talking to people who were working during that time is that even it didn't matter how much more capable the PS3 was because it was such a pain in the ass to build software for.
Yeah,
that like any hardware lead it had was lost by the fact that you had to have one of like 12 people in the world working on it to suck that power out of it.
Right.
Whereas on the Xbox side, you just wrote a Windows program and hit the Xbox compile button and it kind of just worked. Obviously it's not that simple because there was stuff like the memory pool, which was it was at that time pretty unique design for a 3D accelerated console.
I'm pretty sure it was the first console. Maybe somebody can correct me, that had just one giant pool of memory that everything could access, or not everything, but the CPU and the GPU both were working off the same memory.
Definitely in the shader era. I mean, it was the first thing that had programmable shaders and had that kind of an architecture.
Right.
There was I think there was some older stuff that had unified memory but pre 3D or early 3D like the N64.
That was like kind of pre what we think of as a GPU.
Yeah. And the fact that it had a pretty good sized chunk of RAM with 512 megabytes, I think Epic took the blame. I don't know. They seem proud of the fact that they got Microsoft to put an extra 256 megabytes of RAM in that thing.
That was always the story that went around, or they may have said that explicitly.
Mark Rain said it explicitly. He was like, "Hey, you're welcome. I saved a billion people."
Something he would say.
Yeah.
But yeah, they were basically like, here is what we are working on. It's going, here's Gears of War. Like, if you want this to run on your console, you need to double the memory.
Yeah.
I mean, Gears is its own thing. Like, I don't want to get into the nature of the game so much because I think the cover shooter era ended up being like kind of a bummer eventually, or incredibly oversaturated. But in terms of the way that game looked, I mean, that was like a top 5 ever moment of, oh my God, I can't believe video games look like this now.
It was real bumpy
when that thing
everything
came out.
was bumpy and shiny.
Yep.
Also, Gears, this is the generation where where people realized that if you took a popular song that everybody knew and played it slower, made a slow, sad version of it, then it was real good for trailers.
It's not,
thanks.
Not all innovations are positive.
Yeah, fair. I mean, there's a lot of technology stuff. There were also missteps on this one, like the not having the hard drive be required. I think by the end of that generation, everybody who was still at some point midway through, in order to play games on the Xbox, you could not have done it with just memory cards anymore.
Yeah. I mean, they stopped selling SKUs without hard drives eventually,
pretty
of course,
quickly.
But I think at some point, at some level, you always had to account for the possibility that there would not be a hard drive.
One of the things we haven't talked about yet is that they cut the previous Xbox short.
Yes.
Right. So the development of this thing, they accelerated partly because the first Xbox, I think, cost a ton of money to make because it was an x86 part in an NVIDIA chipset with an NVIDIA GPU.
Essentially a GeForce 3 almost.
Yeah. And it was an Enforce motherboard, or what became the Enforce motherboard later on.
Right. And just an off the shelf, 3.5-inch hard drive. Like,
yeah,
you pull that thing apart. Obviously, it had a custom main board, but it kind of, and that was the word even when it came out, was like, this thing's kind of just a PC. This thing is kind of just off the shelf PC parts.
When they were pitching it, they were like, hey, we're going to make a console that's a PC.
Right.
The OG Xbox. The 360, they were like, we're making a console-ass console.
Yeah. Like where the 360 got its own custom PowerPC CPU, like it got custom hardware the way that a proper console does.
Yeah. So they raced it to market and they got it out. Like they were so paranoid that they were going to get beaten to the punch that they ended up beating the Sony out with the PS3 by a full year.
Yeah, that's always been my understanding. I have not read Dean Takahashi's 360 book.
So he talks about that a fair amount in there.
Yeah. Wasn't it the executives were convinced that Sony was also going to ship in 05 and that they had to be out?
Well, so they had the feeling that they were late from the very beginning, because remember the original Xbox was late as well, right? Yes. It was after the PS2.
Yes. I think it was around the same time as the GameCube, but yes, definitely after the PS2.
Yeah, and they felt like Sony had been talking to IBM for an extended period of time at that point, and they'd been working on GPU stuff, and that they were convinced that they were moving it for 2005.
Yeah,
and then they did not.
I didn't. I knew that the 360 processor was also PowerPC based, but I didn't realize it actually uses the same architecture as the Cell.
The Xbox.
Yes, I'm just straight up reading from Wikipedia here. The cores of the Xenon processor were developed using a slightly modified version of the PlayStation 3's Cell processor PPE architecture.
I did not know that. That's fascinating.
According to, so you remember the Cell was a kind of joint development effort between
Toshiba and
IBM. Yeah, IBM, Sony, and Toshiba.
Yeah.
According to David Shippey and Mickey Phipps, this doesn't say who they are, right? Presumably IBM employees. The IBM employees were hiding their work from Sony and Toshiba, IBM's partners in developing the Cell processor.
Of course. Well, I mean, usually that stuff is when you have I don't know if this is how they do it still, but my understanding is that they silo off the different group, like the group that was working on the Wii processor and the Wii processor, and then the groups working on the Xbox and PS. I guess there was no PS3 processor at ATI at that point, right?
Yes.
But they would have been completely firewalled from each other, so they don't have any kind of crossover at all.
Yeah, all three of the consoles in this generation were PowerPC based, so they all had common roots.
Had IBM people, to
some degree, yeah. I don't know. I'm not like suggesting anything illicit was going on there.
No. But it was like, I'm sure there was, hey, I heard about something, kind of like you hear about stuff. Honestly, there's a lot you can tell by watching what people are hiring for. Mm-hmm. If you want to do a little bit of totally legal industrial espionage, you just watch what the hirings look like. So
sure.
Anyway, they got it out a year early. The official announcement at E3 that year, I watched it again for this. I hadn't watched it in a really long time. It is hopelessly optimistic, Brad.
Okay. In what ways?
Well, they're so. I mean, we can play the clip, but they're talking about expanding gaming, and they're talking about reaching tens of millions of people and hundreds of millions of people, but primarily focused in one demographic. But first off, the whole thing's disjointed in a way that is stark contrast to the kind of early to mid return to jobs, like pre-iPhone, post-iPod kind of Apple keynotes of the time. Because Apple knew with 100% certainty that room was full of press people, but they were talking to people who were going to buy their shit. And on this, Jay Allard and Robbie Bach and Peter Moore are standing around, and they're having like a casual, old suit guy, middle-aged suit guy, young cool guy in a sport coat and a hoodie guy talk about video games the way that business dudes that wear khakis talk about video games.
As executives do.
Yeah. And they were like, they were at E3, so it's an industry event. They're talking about market size and demographics, that makes sense. But then they're also talking about how they're going to expand the demographic from the current 18 to 29-year-old male core video game player demographic into everyone.
That's right.
But we're not going to leave those guys behind because we love those guys. Like, they're not, we got to reassure them, right? We don't want to offend the launch customers.
Yes. We're not just going to sell to HiroProtagonist. We're also going to sell to Velocity Girl.
Yes. Oh God, fucking HiroProtagonist. But like, it's a weird contrast to watching like the first iPod keynote where where Steve Jobs laser focused on who he's talking to, right? He's talking to people who love music as much as he loves music. And he wants you to know that. And like, I have no doubt that Robbie Bach and Jay Allard, and especially Peter Moore, God, Peter Moore loves games. I know for a fact Peter Moore loves games.
Yes.
But they were talking to people who buy games for Walmart and Target and GameStop, and they were not talking. And all, oh, by the way, we know that the nerds that play video games are also going to be watching.
Yes. Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, Steve Jobs' stagecraft when it came to product announcements was pretty much unparalleled. I mean, the guy was a huge asshole in a lot of ways, but like, he could command a room when he was showing you a new thing like nobody else before or since.
And he clearly didn't have a team of marketing experts behind him telling him to make sure that he hit all these different points. Because there are a couple of moments where, like, there's a moment where I think Robbie Bach puts his hand on the console. He's like, shit, I put my hand on the console early. He takes it off and then he puts it back on the cue.
Oh my God. I'm like cringing. I'm not even watching this footage and I'm cringing just hearing you describe this.
Yeah. It's like, it's kind of sweet actually, because like it's like they're doing karaoke for the thing. They're like, why are there millions of people watching these things? We've got to get millions of people to watch our things, but they didn't exactly understand why people watch it. And, they also were right about a lot of stuff. I want to play this Jay Allard clip now where he talks about expanding gaming.
30 years ago, we saw the birth of this industry with the arrival of the first 2D games. Games that appealed to everyone. They found a very broad audience that numbered in the tens of millions. And we all remember those great ads from that era, where entire families surrounded the TV on the couch playing games together. Well, then we made the leap from 2D to 3D, and we expanded and jumped our industry past the 100 million mark. But at that very same time, we narrowed our scope to a much more limited demographic. Today, we're poised to make the leap again, this time from 3D to the HD era. Now, of course, the HD era is about high-definition graphics and unbelievable sound, but the implications of the HD era are even more profound than that. It's about the ability to connect with your community and to personalize your experience. It's about unleashing the creative power of human energy. If we work together to create games and experiences that really deliver on the promise of the HD era, as an industry, we'll take games places they've never been before. In the HD era, we're going to reach 1 billion people with our medium. This is a great industry. It's a great business. Our revenues keep growing faster than music, than movies, than television. We're at the cutting edge of technology and the leading edge of imagination. But we used to fill the living room with kids and adults, men and women. But today, we're relying mainly on one type of consumer. Now, don't get me wrong. We love that guy, the 18 to 34-year-old male. He's the backbone of the industry. And with guys like Dead or Alive 4, he's guaranteed to get the incredible gaming experience that he craves. But 360 is also the product that's going to push gaming back into the mainstream. The product that will fill that couch up with people from every demographic and from every market. How on the earth are we going to do that? Well, it takes a product with clear, compelling vision, a vision that living entertainment is powered by human energy. And Xbox 360 is that product. We believe that when you unlock the power of human energy, we're going to bring everybody back to the living room. At the same time, we're going to unlock the potential not only of the medium, but of the entire industry. Next generation, 1 billion people will play our games. And it's not just because they figured out the latest combo move or they figured out how to get past level 14, but because we've unlocked the secret to creating games and entertainment experiences that they can call their own. Games that provide entertainment experiences that appeal to everyone. We've been working for years to fulfill this vision. And the result is Xbox 360. It's the product I've always dreamed of creating. It's the product that will fill the living room back with people who can't wait to get their hands on the controller, to get into the game, to be part of the excitement, and to join us in the community. They want to bring their own creativity to the experience and pay off the true promise of our medium. The essence of our vision is reflected in the name, Xbox 360. It's the product that delivers experiences where the player is always at center stage.
Yeah, he's really walking a line in there, huh?
Oh yeah, man. But it goes on for such a long time. He's like 1 billion people, and then he gets real excited about revenue. Real excited about revenue for a consumer talk, right?
As much as he's in there talking to buyers, like you said, he's definitely also talking to investors.
Shareholders, investors, players. They want everybody to be happy about this keynote.
It's like he strains to get to the highfalutin, like pie in the skies, like, oh, we're gonna unleash the power of human creativity with this, and then like immediately just slips right back into like talking about narrowing scope and limited demographics. It's like, it's so Microsoft.
Well, and like I could understand it if they broke this up by like business dad Robbie Bach and like industry icon Peter Moore, and then cool hip young executive Jay Allard.
Cool, maybe slightly questionable uncle Jay Allard.
Yeah, but no, they get Jay. He's just in here, and also I have to imagine. Think back to 2005. Online's still scary a little bit, right? There's a little bit of like, man, you don't want to let your kids go online. They'll get bad. They'll get kidnapped, and they'll get brought into a cult. And next thing you know, your kids are going to be like doing internet drugs. And so I think that's why they were pushing they were like, HD generation means it's going to be social, and you're going to have your communities. They don't say online at all in there.
Yeah.
It's just. He just keeps going and going and going and going.
I'll give him one thing. He's in there talking about like, yeah, he mentioned the thing you said about, he's like, our core guy, we love that guy. We're not going to alienate that guy.
Yeah.
But he was saying, we want to get everybody else in front of the TV too. They did it with the Netflix app.
Well,
it was not the games. It was the fact that the 360 basically had like the first really good Netflix app that actually got everybody in the house sitting in front of a 360.
But also, who really did it? Apple, Google. Sorry, Microsoft.
Well, later,
they were right that it was going to be 1 billion people.
Yeah,
just not their platform.
Yes, later, yes, for sure.
Yeah. Well, I mean, during the life of this console, for sure, the 1 billion people got online, just not so much on their couches.
That first Xbox Netflix app was a pretty big deal, though.
Yeah, but they didn't sell 1 billion boxes.
No, yeah. Certainly not.
Then the last part about this is after all this launch stuff happened, they sent Xboxes. They must have sent out so many Xboxes.
Yeah, there was a huge marketing push with like the Elijah Wood MTV special, the 0 hour launch event in the Mojave Desert.
Every basketball player and baseball player posting pictures of themselves playing Xbox in their hotel rooms. Musicians,
they blanketed the press with 360 stuff.
Yeah.
They got behind it big.
Magazine editors were important enough to get Xboxes. It was shocking. And then this is the part. If this was like a behind the music, we'd play the dun 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 music. Mm-hmm. The failures started to pile up, Brad.
Yeah. Yes, they did.
I remember the first time I heard the phrase "red ring of death," and it was, "Hey, do you have an Xbox we can borrow? One of ours conked out because there was a pile of Xboxes in every magazine in the company." Mm-hmm. And we were funneling them into OXM so that they could keep working.
Oh, you guys had that too?
Yeah. Well, we had a good pile and a bad pile.
Well, yeah, eventually the bad pile outweighed the good pile, of course. But like, yeah, we straight up had like a stack of extra Xboxes and like sitting in the original cardboard shipping boxes, just waiting
Yep.
to be broken open because you knew eventually they were going to be needed.
The coffins never lay empty.
Yeah.
So the Red Ring of Death started out in the way that major manufacturing defects do, with like people posting on the internet, "Hey, my Xbox just stopped working. Has anybody seen this before? What does it mean when 3 red lights are on the front?" And it turns out it means that it was going to crash anytime it was under any kind of load, and then eventually it would stop working. People, before Microsoft acknowledged that it was an issue and started repairing them, people came up with some crazy fixes, including, load up the CPU and GPU with a high powered game and wrap it in towels so that the vents don't work and it gets hot to the point that the solder remelts and maybe reflows long enough for it to work again for a while. Did you ever actually try that?
I might have once, actually. I can't remember.
I was always afraid to. I was afraid I'd burn the house down.
I don't think it was very effective.
It seems like it would buy you a couple of months, maybe.
I don't know if we've ever gotten an answer on this, but I don't know was it 100% failure rate on that first run?
No. So
was it not?
There were people that did, like, repair companies before. Okay, so it's hard to know, because also there were probably some consoles that were only used for like Geometry Wars and stuff that wouldn't hit it hard enough to heat it up to the point that it actually died. Like my first one died when I was playing, I think, Dead Rising, which was one of the first games to use multiple CPU cores, which generated a lot of heat, which then, blah, blah, blah. There were almost certainly some consoles out there that people used for Hexic and Geometry Wars and nothing complicated and never got hot enough to cause the problem.
I think I would exempt those from my question just because they weren't subjected to normal use. But I guess what I mean is, like, given normal usage patterns, was it guaranteed that because anecdotally, that was certainly my experience.
So the range of failures as reported by repair companies up until that point, who looked at large sample sizes, like 1,000+ sample sizes, where it was like 30% probably.
Wait, really? Man, I would have thought it was a lot higher than that.
Industry standards at that time were like a 3% failure rate. So
sure.
It's 10x worse.
Still catastrophic.
Still pretty bad.
Like when 1 of every 3 you're selling is becoming inoperable, that's pretty bad.
Yeah. They didn't really acknowledge it for a while. But when they did, they actually did a pretty good job dealing with it, I would say. Especially given that up until that point, I don't think I remember anything of this scale failing that people acknowledged and made right, which makes sense for a product designed to last for 8 to 10 years, right?
Yeah, yeah, and also, I mean, look at the investment they made in this thing.
Yeah, yeah.
From R&D to marketing to the whole push behind trying to break into this emerging market, like they kind of had no choice but to make this right.
Yeah, this was essentially them. Like, had they not made this right, they would have lost the multi-billion-dollar beachhead that they spent the beachhead they spent billions of dollars establishing. Yeah. And they there was a story of where Peter Moore shared the experience he had of walking into Ballmer's office to tell him about the fix, where he was just repeating to himself, okay, we're going to send them an empty box via FedEx. They're going to pack the console in that empty box. They're going to send it back to us. And then in the next 3 weeks, they're going to get it back fixed. It was going to cost more than $1 billion, 1.15, 1.25, somewhere in there, $1 billion to fix all the failed consoles. Of that, $250 million was going to go to, according to this story, Peter Moore, to FedEx. And he went to Ballmer and he's like, told him what was going to happen. Ballmer's like, how bad is it? Here's what we're going to do. What's it going to cost? Okay, do it. And that was it. That was the whole thing. Okay.
I was bracing for some like Ballmer blew his top kind of thing, but
I don't know that Peter Moore would tell the true version of that story if Ballmer blew his top.
Fair.
I mean, the way this stuff happens typically is that somebody's like, we're going to, so Microsoft doesn't say that this is actually what happened, but the German magazine CT, which is a famous computer magazine, clocked the problem at the time that was later confirmed, 10 years later confirmed by Microsoft, which was that they used a lead-free solder that didn't handle heating and cooling cycles particularly well and developed microfractures. In 2021, Microsoft finally, as part of this big giant documentary about the Xbox, the 20-year anniversary of the Xbox, they did officially say, hey, the problem was bad solder on the GPU flip chip, which developed very small cracks over heating cycles that caused it to have a bad connection and crash when on underload. And most certainly everything I've been able to read is that most certainly that was a result of an EU requirement to use lead-free solder, which was not a common thing at the time, or not super common at the time in 2005. And they used the wrong lead-free solder, which probably saved them 1/100 of a cent per unit or something ridiculous. And they spent billions of dollars fixing.
Well, the compounding problem was that they rushed to market as fast as they could and just didn't do the due testing to uncover something like this.
No, the things I've read have said that they did the testing. So there was a person who was vetted by a couple of publications to be a former Microsoft employee who came out with, hey, here's what actually happened. And that person reported that on early 100 unit first runs off the line batches, they would have 38 working Xboxes out of a run of 100. So they probably knew that there were some problems. I don't think they expected it to be a 30% fail rate.
Sure.
And just to be clear, that 30% fail rate is a number that came out of people who were testing and repairing consoles that were not covered by the 3-year extended warranty that Microsoft made. So it is a number that I would describe as suspect. Microsoft never gave an official fail rate. They never listed it as anything more than we had to write down on the red ring problem on their annual reports. So it will likely never know what the actual fail rate was.
Sure. And also at the time, they rushed the first fix out, which is to try to epoxy the GPU down to the board to keep it from flexing.
Yeah. Which
on
worked for a
existing
little
boards. Bit. I think it was somewhat effective.
That was the Jasper. That was the ones that had HDMI. I think I started with that.
No, because I think these were existing boards. I think they were literally taking the boards that they had already produced and trying to add this as a Band-Aid. But then, they rapidly, every console goes through rapid hardware revisions, even when you can't see cosmetically externally that they have. So they added an HDMI port after a year, and pretty quickly they were shipping. Gosh, maybe it was the Jasper revision was the one that you wanted to get. Once your first Xbox died and you used your Xbox enough that you were I just want to buy a new one that works, and you were staring at product codes or UPCs or whatever on the box, trying to make sure this. I've got to make sure this is a Jasper.
So I had a Jasper that died. So they all the problem wasn't solved until much later. Even when they got to the Slims, really was when you knew you had a safe Xbox.
My memory was the S model, the first big, which was 2008. No, 2010. I think it was 2010. I think 2010.
I was working at Tested when that came out.
Yes, we were in the Sausalito basement.
Yeah,
that was 5 years after launch almost that they rolled out the radical redesign.
That was the one with black. They had the Xbox 360 on the stage, and you lifted it off.
Yes, we haven't even talked about the Inhale.
What was the Inhale?
They wanted the original design. They made a big deal out of the design houses that they contracted to work on.
They worked with the people who ended up making the headsets, right? Astro.
I can't remember.
It was Astro Studios, and I can't remember the Japanese firm.
I can't remember. Yeah, I think there were 3 studios that worked on it, but Astro Studios. Yes,
Astro Studios. They ended up making headphones.
Anyway, the joke, especially around our office at the time, the joke about the 360 was that they had said they wanted it to look like an Inhale. That's why you get this kind of concave look to it.
Wow,
top and bottom, because it looks like it's inhaling. And then, once the S came along, that look evolved and became more angular. But it wasn't until that S model launched that I feel like I truly thought okay, this thing works now. You can just buy this and expect it to work.
HiroProtagonist loves an Inhale.
Yeah. He sure does.
It's such a, I mean, there were other failures. On the 360, the disc scratching thing impacted a bunch of people.
It's somewhat forgotten, but early models of 360 would eat discs by scratching them until they became unreadable. I think that was only in vertical orientation.
It was in vertical orientation is because they didn't balance. They didn't lock the drive in the vertical spot, and if you bumped it while it was running, it would hit stuff and scratch. So 3 three rings on the outside edge of the disc, I think was what happened usually.
Yeah, I lost a game to that one time. It was not pleasant.
They the other non-technical failures, just pure ecosystem failures in the HD DVD, which was the battle for high def discs was quickly and completely won by Blu-ray. I still don't. I like. I mean, that's probably a whole other episode, is why Blu-ray beat HD DVD.
It came down to business, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I remember at the time, like some investment got made. It was some kind of strategic alliance or something happened on the business side that finally just kind of locked in Blu-ray's dominance. Like, HD DVD was not bad. Like, Blu-ray ultimately, from what I remember, like, Blu-ray definitely has the higher capacity, but I believe the on-disc software was better with HD DVD.
Blu-ray had higher capacity. I remember, like, the Blu-ray menus were authored in Java, and that got a lot of criticism. Like, the capabilities of what the Blu-ray. Granted, who cares about software running off of movie discs at this point? Like, whatever. Yeah.
But at the time, like, that was the interface you had to work through, right?
The codecs that were available were slightly better on the Blu-ray side.
Yes, that is definitely true ultimately, and I think that was downstream of the bigger discs, right? Like,
partly it was due to the bigger disc, partly it was because the HDTV was backed by Microsoft, so it had Microsoft codecs at the time, which were kind of
licensing stuff as well. So I have ripped a number of HD DVD discs off of that drive, because you could plug it into a PC and also just use it that way.
It was VP8, right?
I think VC1 is the most common codec that I've seen from HD DVD discs.
But I think largely the other thing was that there was concerns about the copy protection on HD DVD from the studios, which ended up being moot because the Blu-ray copy protection didn't fare any better in the long term, but it did last a little bit longer than HD DVD stuff.
Yes. And then
this is the bullet point that's going to get expanded the most, I think, in conversation.
Speaking of ill-fated add-ons, the Kinect.
I kind of like the Kinect, Brad.
Man, even the second model Kinect on the Xbox One didn't work anywhere near what they promised.
I think for me, I liked the Kinect because all of my memories of Kinect are doing fun things with you guys at Giant Bomb and not having to deal with it in a review context, which would have been maddening.
Oh my God. Failed product. Like, just completely fucking failed to deliver on what it was supposed to do.
I think about, like, the Double Fine thing that they made, where you could make the floor lava.
Yeah, that was goofy and fun. Like, occasionally somebody with the creativity of a Double Fine would recognize that thing for what it was and come up with something cool and interesting with it.
Yeah.
But all of the attempts to make, like, actual serious games around it were complete disasters.
Oh yeah, no, that the Steel Battalion game was that was an Xbox One game, I think, but
it was one of the most infuriating review experiences of my life, for sure. But even at the platform level, just like the interface elements that it was supposed to enable just never worked like they were supposed to.
What, you mean your pinching hand gesture to launch the app didn't work? Weird. Anyway, and it was also kind of stupid expensive for the way it worked. It
was expensive, but it was successful. Like, it sold gangbusters due to the promise. They sold it. By sold, I mean, like, pitched a vision
parents
for
bought
it
them because they wanted their kids to move around the living room instead of sitting on the couch playing Call of Duty and eating Cheetos.
And I think just everybody thought, the pitch videos they made for this thing were pretty enticing. It's just that it never actually worked.
Yeah.
Right. But because it sold so well, that led to the ascendance of Don Matrick and the focus on Kinect and TV and, entertainment apps with the Xbox One. Like, it kind of torpedoed, basically what happened with the Kinect torpedoed the entire next generation of the Xbox.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because Phil Spencer came out last week and was talking about that. But like, did they not look at the attach rate for games on that thing? I can't imagine that they were selling like 10 games per Kinect or anything ridiculous like that. Like, people had to buy the first 2 games to be like, man, this doesn't work. Anyway,
you got me, man. Hubris is all I can say.
Throw the pickle at the screen. That's all I know. It's a weird, like, it's been fun going back and looking at it and seeing what ended up being the important things and what ended up being not. And when you look at 360 retrospectives now, they do this thing that we did, which is just like, oh yeah, by the way, they had this problem with the hardware early on where 30% of all the consoles probably died. And then they had to spend $1 billion or $2 billion fixing them for the people that they hosed. And then they were never really great. It just kind of was like better for a while. And then you bought one of the second rev consoles. But it's like, I don't think that the PS4, PS5, even Switch, like you wouldn't have multiple accounts on a Switch where everybody has their own friends list and the ability to join games and jump into other people's games in the same way that you do now.
Yeah. And I mean, even in the era, you saw Sony pivoting constantly, trying to keep up with what Microsoft was doing, right? Like trophies were not a launch feature on the PS3.
Oh, and PS3 was the generation that Sony went offline entirely for like a 3-month period when they were hacked, right?
Right. But you know, stuff like trophy, like they were playing catch up through large swaths of the PS3 era.
Yeah,
like adding hacking features into the PS3 to try to keep up with what Microsoft was doing.
Well, and then you also saw they also established the norms for things like the owner rights for digital downloaded games, right? The fact that like the idea of a home console that you could always play, whether it's online or offline. And if you were online with your non-home console, you'd be able to play, but not if you were offline, which is, I mean, being real, shitty for consumers compared to just buying a thing that you can move from machine to machine. But it did let us do things like I played multiplayer games. I played multiplayer Burnout with my wife on our second 360 when we each had our own TV with one download because she had the home one and I had the one that was always online or whatever.
Right.
And I mean, that carried forward even to stuff like the Switch and the PS4 and the other games. Like this is a console that established literally almost all of the norms of the modern internet connected console.
Absolutely.
And then Microsoft blew it on the next generation.
They sure did. Even the Xbox One had a lot of interesting features that I felt like carried on from the smart stuff they were doing with the 360, like the like automated dashboard updates and stuff like that. You know, that stuff was in the background of the failures with it, with Connect 2 and the cable box integration and all that weird stuff. But like quietly behind the scenes, they were still innovating on just basic usability stuff. Like, oh, this thing will just update itself overnight. You don't have to. In fact, automated patch downloads never existed on the 360, did they? Like, see, I'm forgetting.
You launched the game and it would download it, but the downloads were small, so it didn't matter.
Right.
That was the trade-off, right? Is like the Xbox One downloads could get to be like 20 gigs and it was really, really slow. So you had to do it overnight. Otherwise, people would have to spend 20 minutes waiting for their game to launch.
Right. But, you know, that's another example of a feature with the Xbox One that now we just take for granted, but games patching overnight while the console is in sleep, or the console even being in sleep, basically. You know,
and then things like, hey, you can have your console will tell you what's on TV on your cable box, which you have plugged into the input port on the back of it.
Maybe less
good, that one.
Appealing. Yeah. But anyway, yes, they have, between mainly the 360 and to an extent the Xbox One, like they absolutely have defined what a modern console should do at the system level.
Yeah, it's fun because it's been fun going back through this because you forget what a big deal stuff like voice was, right? And you know, the historical ramifications of this are that they came into they spent this entire generation, like you said, with Sony on the back foot, and they came into the next generation with an opportunity to just continue what they'd done. And then they launched the Xbox One with a frankly incomprehensible digital rights management scheme for games and a download only or download primary. Like even when you bought a disc game, it would be a download and all the stuff that like we understood because it was our job to understand it so we could explain it to people. But consumers and people watching pretty roundly rejected to the point that, you know, they never really recovered.
Yeah. And, you know, they launched a console that just didn't play games quite as well as the PS4 did. I mean, the difference was kind of negligible for casual people, but for people who are hyper into video games, like, you know, this console is hitting 1080p regularly, this other one is not.
Yeah.
Was kind of a death knell.
I don't know if stuff like that, like, I don't know if normal people who play games, I mean, people who follow games definitely care about that stuff. I feel like people who just play games aren't as aware of that, but they are aware of things like, oh, hey, every time I try to start this thing, it's like downloading a patch and it's 20 minutes before I can play the game if I play a game once a week or once a month. And that kind of stuff is a bad time.
Yeah. Which the 360 ended strangely, and obviously the console that came after was kind of not great in a lot of ways, but most of the 360 era was pretty industry defining. I
mean, like, I think if we're being honest, kind of both of the next gen consoles carried on the crimes of the previous generation and didn't make some of that stuff better. Like the download speeds, all of that, like there was a lot of high level jank in the next generation that really wasn't solved until the PS5 and the series consoles came out, as far as I'm concerned. So
it makes me a little wistful going through all this stuff, because it was such an exciting time, because so many wildly new innovative things were happening, and now all of that stuff is just kind of has been hammered out and is just part of, like you said, it's all just the table stakes now for a new machine. And I don't think there's probably ever going to be that period of rapid innovation again, because so much of it has just, the work has been done already.
It's why when people ask me what the most important, it's why I think it's one of the most, like, Microsoft lost to the living room, but defined what consoles are. And like, they probably would have made more money if they hadn't lost the next generation. Which, just to be clear, when we say that, we're referencing Phil Spencer talking about the first digital generation being the most important one, specifically because that's where you establish your games library.
Yeah. That was a good point that he made, that I hadn't actually fully considered, that, a lot of people are, especially for my purposes, like as somebody who covers games, because like I have games everywhere.
Yeah.
Because in a lot of cases, it's like whatever version we get sent, it's like, oh, I have this on the Xbox One, I have this on the PS4, because that's just the review code that showed up. So I don't think about it in those terms, but people who amassed a library on a console in the last generation are definitely going to be loyal to that console, because they can keep all those games.
Well, especially as backwards compatibility became, again, table stakes for the next generations.
Right.
So how are you feeling about this, Brad?
This is up there among, I'm sitting here thinking, like, what are the most influential consoles of all time? Like, this is absolutely up there.
It's like this and the SNES for
like
me,
this,
probably.
or the NES or something. It's like, it's definitely like top three, probably. I start to say most important. Important is a very broad word that people can interpret and argue about all kinds of different ways. But like, in terms of influence, I think it is absolutely like a top three.
Yeah, it's the lasting influence is like, you look at the Xbox Series and you look at the PS5 and you see the shadow of this console in almost every aspect of those devices.
Yep.
So anyway, so that's it. This is our if you like this, let us know. We kind of I like, we were thinking about it as an inflection point, right? This is the moment when this thing that had previously been offline became an online thing. And it's the moment. It's like what was it? The old 3, 2, 1 contact. It's the moment where everything happens. This was the moment where online happened, but where social happened for console games. So let us know if you're on the Discord. You can post feedback into this week's episode. If you are not, you can send an email to techpod@content.town. And as always, it's 100% listener supported show. So if you want to get into that Patreon and you're not there, into that Discord and you're not there, you can join the Patreon for $5 a month.
Exciting things are happening with Discord threads. No, not those threads, the other kind of threads.
I will say, well, the Discord threads thread is probably going to become not a thread anymore and just be a channel, because it's much higher traffic than I realized. We did just this morning. We're trying something new because the Zelda game is generating a lot of games traffic. We made forums in the Discord.
Yep.
The mods made a good case. The Thread Club made a good case.
I think it was definitely the right move. I give a bit of the side eye to Discord's kind of product design at the moment.
Look, we're dangerously close to opening a UBB is all I'm going to say.
Yeah.
I don't ever want to maintain a forum again from an ops and back end perspective. It's a pain in the ass.
Yeah. But these new types of threads seem better than the old types of threads in Discord. For what it's worth.
The thing I realized when we were talking about this morning is that the old kinds of threads become invisible when you turn them on.
Yeah.
And it's where you put people who are like, maybe you put the stuff off to the side that you don't want to have front and center. And the new kinds of threads are very visible and like it draws people in. You're like, oh man, I do want to know about, I do want to know about truck driving on Thursday nights. But anyway, you can join the Discord. You can get in the Patreon for $5 a month by going to patreon.com/techpod. And we appreciate everybody who joins and helps support the show because that's we don't run ads.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yeah, you are the reason we are here.
Yeah. We would rather you monetize us than monetize you, I guess.
Yes, we're the product, not you.
Yeah. But we also every week thank our executive producer tier patrons, including Nick Johnston, Paddle Creek Games makers of Fractured Veil, Andrew Slosky, Brad's Midsize Hoodoo Voodoo Switcheroo, Octothorpe Bunny Crimes, Just Wedge, Joel Krauska, Twinkie says Mike B is the GIF Lord, David Allen, and James Kamek. Thank you all so much.
Yeah, thank you.
And I guess that'll do it for us this week. I hope people like this episode. If they do, let us know. And if you don't, let us know too, because we appreciate all the feedback. And we will see you all next week. Bye, everybody.